timely, insightful, discussion and analysis of economic trends and markets. From Southern California to Sacramento, featuring business and political leaders, unique field reports. From Orange County and the campus of Chapman University, this is the Chapman Business Report.
And welcome back to the Chapman Business Report. It's our weekly look at the economy, the national economy, and a special focus on the regional economies of Southern California. I'm Pete Weitzner. I head up the broadcast journalism program. We're on main campus where we shoot our Chapman Business Report. I'm over at Dodge College of Film and Media Arts, just a couple of blocks to the west of us. Also, to my left, my regular co-host and commentator is Dr. Esmael Adibi. 35 years he's been the chief economist here at Chapman at the Anderson Center for Economic Forecasting and Research, and recently put out their 35th annual revision to their economic forecast. We'll be talking about what they see for the rest of 2012 and into 2013. And Essie, lots to talk about. We've got the latest on the jobs front, which is mixed. Better here, actually, than nationally.
Yes. That's
a change. Real estate, some encouraging news. Orange County Register has now changed hands, as a lot of other papers have as well. Talk about the future of papers. Gas prices moving up now.
Again, yeah.
When did that happen? So lots to talk about with the boss and all these California bankruptcies. But let's begin as we record the show in California and focus on the state and national economy in Europe, because well, it's like healthcare, right? No one wants to talk about it, but it is the most significant economic event, situation, right, affecting all the world, right?
Exactly.
The markets move.
It's all about Europe.
It is.
Good news comes out, the stock market does well, everybody becomes optimistic.
As on this day, as we record this.
Exactly, yeah. Today was...
Good news.
Actually, it's very funny. The head of their central bank, like our Bernanke, said we'll do anything possible to preserve euro. That's it. The stock market suddenly jumps 200 points.
Nothing concrete.
So, nothing concrete, no plan. But that shows how much dependency exists now, how much interlink exists.
Well, it shows how much the markets have always hated change.
Yeah, exactly.
So even if in the long run it might be a good thing, say that Greece were to leave the euro or something, that would be change, would be an adjustment. They don't want that.
No. The main thing the market is looking, that they come up with a plan, Eurozone, plan to preserve, what's going on there, keep the euro stable, and get the economy going in Europe. And unfortunately, as we discussed it before in different shows, they're not coming with this solid plan to solve the problem. It's all keep on putting Band-Aid here and there, and then one country after another gets into trouble, and again, the stock market, the bank, and the problem. Of course, at the beginning, it was all about banking, and now it's becoming really economic problem.
Right.
Most of these countries now are either in recession or dipping into recession.
Which they need to be. If they take the austerity measures, which I guess they're taking, and cut back on spending, which is what got them in trouble.
That's where the debate is. No, that's where the debate is. Everybody knows.
What camp are you in?
Yeah, see, everybody knows that they have to go through austerity program and ultimately reduce their debt and deficit. There's no question.
There are some who say they should spend more, and that.
Yeah, but look at UK, for example. Prime Minister Cameron went through a huge austerity program. And if you remember, there were some riots actually in London after he introduced it, got it through Parliament. But now the second GDP number that came, second quarter GDP, is negative. So it means austerity programs have some negative impact on growth. The question is, how would you balance the two? That is, reducing deficit, reducing debt, at the same time ensure the economy is going to grow. And that's their biggest problem. We know Greece is in recession, Italy, Spain, they're in recession. Actually, over half of the Eurozone countries, which there are 17 of them, they're in recession. And if they're in recession, they affect each other. For example, Greece or Spain, if they're not buying as much, it's impacting Germany's economies. They're going to go into recession. And once you go into recession, there's less tax revenue. And that by itself, again, puts pressure on deficit and borrowing needs and so forth.
Well, you have these economies that are much more dependent on government spending. I should hesitate when I say this, than ours is.
We're almost there.
We're almost there. And you have banks cutting back, shoring up their balance sheet. How can an economy grow?
Yeah, so this is where the debate is. And I am actually in a camp that they have to a little bit slow down on austerity program. And more or less what I advise for us to do here in the US, the same thing. We have a fiscal cliff coming January 1st of 2013. Right. Yeah, we can talk about it more, but the problem is if the economy is so fragile that growth is barely 1 or 2 percentage points, obviously, if you pull a plug on some spending, whether it's coming from federal or private sector or state, it's going to put downward pressure on the economy. So they have to find a balance. But their major problem, it's not that much austerity program, it's how to preserve, the integrity of the system. That is, the trust of the investors to buy the debt that are being issued, the bonds that are being issued by Spain and Italy.
Spanish 2-year bond is yielding?
It was over 10 years is over 7, and that's almost 5% too. And you can put it in perspective. A Spanish bond is over 7%, 10-year. German bond is 1.3%.
U.S. 10 years?
1.423. So you can see that extra, borrowing cost is putting even further pressure on their deficit and debt.
And last word on this, you're still a fan of something they haven't gone to, and that's this Eurobond.
Eurobond. That's ultimately, I think, of course, as we started the show, we mentioned there's a head of the central bank said we do anything possible, to preserve the integrity.
Why are they not going that route?
The problem is a couple of problems.
Require more of a buy-in by Germany?
More importantly, is their treaty does not allow them to do it. When they put the treaty together, still they gave independence to each country to run their fiscal policy. And that was the biggest mistake, by the way. You can't have a common currency and everybody run their own tax and spending plan.
Like a drunken sailor.
Exactly. So they have to change the treaty. And to change the treaty, you have to bring the stronger ones on board. I think French have no problem with Eurobond. Ultimately, they're going to come on board. And Germans obviously are resisting it. Part of it is economic, part of it is political. How would you justify and telling German people that we're going to now borrow in one pool and pay rather than 1.3% in our borrowing for 10 years, we have to pay 3% or 4%. But ultimately, that is what would bring integrity to the system and bring the cost of borrowing for these countries that are in deep trouble.
And so not just the financial markets, and we talk about, of course, the potential for the bank contagion.
Yes.
We're here as we record this middle of the summer, second quarter earnings period. I'm hard pressed to think of any company that didn't say, even if they did well, and Apple actually for them did not do that well, and one of the reasons they say Europe slowed. And every company, I think eBay might be the lone exception, maybe because all the Europeans are inside and trying to make extra cash.
There are two factors there, Pete. One is obviously a slowdown in Europe. Obviously they're not selling as much, but at the same time, euro got weaker and dollar got stronger. So what it means, whatever they sold there, for example, McDonald's, which I'm sure it has big operation there, to translate that to US dollar, they got a little bit of an earning. So they got pressure on both sides. The actual sales is down, and then conversion to US dollar brought up their net revenue lower. So that's a combination of those two factors. But let's not forget, we started with Europe. Obviously, that's on the news. Everybody hears about it. But we're seeing a slowdown now in other countries that trade with Europe. For example, Chinese. They sell tons of goods and services to European. So a slowdown there is slowing their economy, plus their internal demand is weak. So a slowdown in China also is causing that global slowdown. Even Brazil is showing some contraction.
And conversely, California is hardly the exemplar for a growing economy. As you mentioned, here we sell to Canada, as far as exports, to Canada, to Mexico.
Canada and Mexico. At least we're a little bit in better. But nonetheless, we have exposure.
Of course.
Chinese. I think China is the third trading partner for California, so that's important. Japan is fourth. UK is fifth. So. You cannot avoid, if there's a significant slowdown in economies of our trading partner, you cannot avoid not to feel the pain, or at least the pinch. And what's happening now, California is feeling the pinch, US is feeling the pain. And it is adversely impacting our economy, not just the stock market. Now it's translated, the financial problem is translating to real economy. And unless they do something, European, again, moving toward more stability and preventing all of these negative news, I hate to say it, we might even face another recession. And that's why you see our stock market is going through quite a bit of hiccup now.
Well, we'll get a short-term stimulus. They got the Olympics.
That's for UK, yeah, but it's not going to help much.
Europe is small. People can visit and spend money, and the euro is weak. All right, let's start with jobs here. And you just did your revision, and it was a fairly optimistic overall look for the economy. And you see, I think next year the jobless rate should move down nationally in here. But boy, last 3-4 months, we're just not creating many jobs. Certainly not worthy of an expansion. Certainly not enough to keep the rate even where it is, which nationally is 8.2%. Again, only 80,000 jobs. As I say here, break even is 145,000. Why the slowdown?
Yeah, let's go back again. First quarter of the year. We're talking about the national.
200,000 plus.
Excellent. On average, we were 200,000. What was the GDP growth? Again, just for our audience, GDP measures the total spending in the country. It is consumers, it's investors, it's what foreigners buy, what government spends. GDP was roughly about 2% growth, and we did good numbers, 200,000 jobs. So you would say, well, maybe businesses were optimistic, it's 2% growth and it's going to pick up, so I better do some hiring and some catch-up. Second quarter, GDP, we're going to get it very soon. Actually, we're taping this show now, but tomorrow it's going to be released. I bet you it's going to be close to 1% growth. So if spending is growing only 1%, do you expect businesses to go out and hire a bunch of people? Not. And that's why...
Add to that the healthcare uncertainty, the election uncertainty, the fiscal cliff.
And the extension of taxes, and there's a payroll taxes. I mean, if you look at all the headwinds, so we got really weak job numbers for the last 3 months, averaging about 80,000. And as you know, we need quite a bit more to really bring the unemployment down. And the reason unemployment, by the way, is not spiking up, because we're getting some self-employment. You know, the numbers that we report typically, these are all payroll employees, people who receive checks from businesses. So the problem is all goes back to spending. I mean, think of it this way. I mean, a common, very simple example for people to absorb. If you're running a business and your sales goes up by 2-3 percentage points, are you going to rush out and hire people just because of 2-3% increase in your sales?
Especially if there's uncertainty down the road.
The best if you need it, you pay overtime, or you maybe even rely on more productivity. So we need much faster growth in terms of spending, GDP, to get the employment pick up. And then, as you mentioned, all the headwinds that we can talk about each one of them and spend hours, analyzing what the impact is, which all of them are negative, unfortunately.
The brighter news is certainly Orange County. We created, boy, what a month in June. I guess maybe to be expected, you have Disney's hiring and things like that, but 8,700 is a
but be careful.
topping number.
Yeah,
but the rate went up.
Yeah, be careful. See, that's
all
what
the grads getting in the job force.
Exactly. Actually, everybody says, gee, we produced that many jobs. Why? The rate actually was a big jump.
7.5 to 7.9.
7.9. The reason is, first of all, our numbers are not seasonally adjusted.
Right.
That is, we don't adjust that June is typically we get college graduates coming to the job market, and there are some seasonal hiring. But what is very, very important to look is year-over-year job growth, what has happened. And Orange County showed the strongest year-over-year percentage growth of about 2.3% last month, which we have not seen it since beginning of recession. So we are on right track, and even for California. I'm sure you noticed California job creation.
It was good.
The last couple of months, I mean, we were talking about national economy, 80,000 jobs. California is generating almost half of that, almost close to 40,000 jobs.
Go figure.
Some people say, what's going on? There are a couple of factors. One is California got hit really hard during recession. So there was a massive layoff. Everybody cut to the bone. And now it's kind of like a catch-up mode. You know, businesses are seeing they cannot survive with their existing employment
Although,
base.
again, it's certainly not uniform. And we've talked about the two Californias, the coastal and the inland.
Exactly.
Happens at the same time that 3 California cities file for bankruptcy. One of the things we'll talk about more with the boss when we return on the Chapman Business Report. We'll also talk about earnings season. Here's a look at an Orange County company, a healthcare company, ICU Medical. We'll be right back more on the Chapman Business Report. And we are back on the Chapman Business Report. Pete Weitzer joined by the good Dr. Esmael Adibi, Doctor of the Economy, talking about jobs and the improving California jobs picture. I guess one thing's got to be, as we've seen in the last few months, home sales are up and some building activity.
Oh, sure, that's helping. You know, if you look at beginning of the recession, 2007, what really hurt us was collapse of construction spending. I mean, from peak to trough, construction spending went down by 70%. And it was nothing really out there, whether it's residential, TI, or even heavy construction. So what is happening now, first of all, commercial still is under pressure. We have seen some activity, but not much. But residential is showing some life, mostly in multiple families, and because rent is firming up. But that is creating some construction activity, and in fact, construction spending is not a drag anymore. And if you look at California and Orange County, we're seeing some job growth in construction sector. What is a drag on overall?
I know you don't like monthly figures. We had 3,400 new construction jobs in Orange County.
I mean, it's hard to believe. Yeah,
you mentioned construction.
Yes, but
if you drive through Irvine, you see a lot of construction going on homes.
Oh, definitely, but not 3,400. You know, those are not adjusted seasonally again.
I know.
But year over year, we're seeing improvement in construction activity. So, at least for a change, we don't have a drag from that sector.
Right.
Now, and that's important for us. I mean, we don't, when economists look at different sectors, you know, you want obviously all sectors, broad-based recovery, all of them to gain job. But even if one is not gaining job, we don't want it to be a drag. So
sure.
Bring the overall, and construction is out of that zone.
Leisure and hospitality here in California doing very well. Professional business services, which is accountants and lawyers, they're doing very well. Manufacturing had been.
Yes.
But slowed down.
A little hiccup, yes. And actually, we do keep track of manufacturing in California and Orange County. California, both of them dipped down a little bit, but it's still, California is doing a little bit better than Orange County. And again, all of that goes, what do you do with manufacturing good? Part of it you sell to your domestic customers, and part of it to your foreign customers. And the foreigners really are the guilty party here. They're not buying as much, they're not placing as much order, and that's what's creating a little bit of a drag. However, still, I would argue that there would not be job losses in manufacturing sector. So yes, maybe they're not going to generate very many jobs, but they're not going to be a drag. Construction is going to generate some job. You mentioned professional business services, leisure hospitality, healthcare is doing very well. Wholesale and retail trade, actually, they're doing good. What's the biggest drag? It's government, and it's not just the state, by the way. Most people think it's state government. You know, we're seeing more of a drag coming from education, which is spread out throughout the state, and also cities. Cities are in big trouble too because of the tax revenue.
Locally here, Westminster had a $10 million deficit. They let go over 10% of their full-time workforce, an equivalent amount, 30 part-time people. They can't raise taxes. They floated the idea, could they raise taxes? So what choice do they have? They have to balance their budget.
And remember, the city's revenue, where it's coming from.
Right.
It's mostly sales tax.
And property tax.
And property taxes. And some of them, they have a little bit of a vehicle license fee. And some cities, if they're lucky, they get hotel occupancy taxes.
So Anaheim's going to be okay.
Anaheim gets lots of that. Irvine gets lots of that. But when you look at some of the cities, they're going through bankruptcy or whatever they call that. You know the cities that are going through. San Bernardino is
Stockton,
one.
San Bernardino, and Mammoth Lakes in rapid-fire succession.
Yeah, and the reason is because, especially look at San Bernardino, for example, their problem is property taxes, and sales tax is not growing. High unemployment rate, consumers are not spending. In property taxes, when a home is in true foreclosure, what do you expect? People are not writing their property tax checks. So all of that is putting really a strain on the city governments, and they lost their redevelopment money, although that was intended for a particular program, but sometimes they were tapping in that. That's gone, so they're under quite a bit of pressure.
Yeah, I think by the way, Westminster, the entire city is a redevelopment area, so that crushed them.
That crushed them. And again, we want to separate, so we don't want to really give this message. The cities that they have very strong tax base, sales tax base, they're doing good because consumer spending coming back. And again, you can think of, at least in Orange County, we can think of Anaheim as one, and Irvine and Costa Mesa, because they have major shopping centers and consumers are coming back and spending. Not by huge amount, but it still is helpful for them.
But even in Costa Mesa, which here has South Coast Plaza, has budget problems.
Oh, sure, because it's not just sales tax. You need property taxes and you need taxes from hotel occupancy. Costa Mesa doesn't have as many hotels in there.
And they have the
versus
pension
Irvine.
issue.
Oh, yeah, and providing services is getting expensive, whether it's for public, safety.
Which is their biggest expense.
Again, so the expenses are going up, tax revenue is not going up, and they have some obligation that they have to satisfy based on their contract. Some of these services are contractual, so you can't just go in and say, hey, I can't pay you or bring it down 10%, unless they go through some legal process, and that's what's happening.
Right, and that's what some of them are trying to do, drive a harder bargain, say, with the sheriff's department.
To negotiate.
One last word on job market, because there's so many things that make this, unemployment is high, but there are things that make this particular job market even tougher. Our last show, we talked about it's hard for folks who usually don't have too much difficulty getting work, and that's older workers, because they've got their They've got their network built up, they're established, but they're out of work a longer time than they have been historically. And now what we call millennials, and these are the folks who recently graduated college.
Yes.
53%, they say, of college grads, a Drexel University study, are either out of work or at jobs not requiring a college degree. That's a huge number.
See, where it's really hitting the labor force is on that older group and younger group. The middle group with the reasonable salary, with some experience, they're very desirable. But the firms shy away from getting older workers, I hate to say it, not because of their age, but they're probably more expensive, they've been out of job for a long time, they're worried about their experience, and I hate to say it, they're worried about the healthcare costs.
Sure.
So they're shying away from that group. When it comes to younger group, they always say, well, this guy doesn't have any experience, and I can probably get somebody with 2, 3, 4, 5 years of experience at the same amount of salary and wages. So it's really putting pressure on those two groups. Having said this, though, there are still some majors, some field of studies, such as engineering, computer programmers, finance, accounting. Those are really in high demand.
If I could only have stuck it out as a CPA.
Yeah, you would have been. You would have been a
money
partner.
in the bank. They start out at what now? 60, 70?
Yeah, they start at 60, but you know they work really hard if they're in public accounting. They have to pay their dues.
It wasn't the hard work, it was that I couldn't do it. Auditing is difficult work. Let me tell you, auditing inventory, try that sometime. You want to talk about earnings? You want to talk about we're going to have another year? Was it 3 or 4 in a row now of $1 trillion deficits in this country?
Yeah.
So we've just gotten used to that, right?
Yes, part of it was understandable. Again, remember when we went to this recession, this is a great recession. This was the biggest impact on government tax collection. I mean, they lost tax revenue, and then whenever you go to a recession, social demand increases, social benefits such as unemployment insurance, healthcare, food stamp, and all of that put pressure.
Numbers of people on.
And then we did a couple of stimulus, packages by President Bush and Obama. All of that, they were one-time hit that we got. But if you fundamentally look, we're running about $1 trillion. $1 trillion of deficit. I mean, the peak was about 1.5.
Moving down.
Yeah,
it was 1.3 in 2011.
Because we don't have these one-time stimulus kicking in. But we cannot afford to run on continuous basis $1 trillion of deficit, because that means your debt every year is going to go up $1 trillion, and that's going to become very close to what Greece is experiencing in Spain and Italy.
We tangentially talked about earnings when we talked about Europe right at the top of the show, but it's been a fairly lackluster to disappointing second quarter earnings report, especially on the top line, which we focus on the top line. I said even Apple. I mean, they were up 25%, but iPhone sales were below.
But you know how they justified it, and I'm not expert on that. You follow those better. Is basically they said people are waiting
for the i5.
When they say something new is coming in a few months, people are going to pause. But
the industrial company, a lot of the techs, AMD and Intel,
it's just basically
Qualcomm did all right.
All of these data. See, we're getting mixed data, but unfortunately, majority of them are kind of suggesting that this slowdown is serious, and unless it is reversed and there's a pickup in economic activity, the signs are pointing in a wrong direction, and that is what our worry is. Our forecast suggests we're not going to have a recession for 2012 and 13, but with all the headwinds, if these headwinds gain strength and become stronger, we are so fragile, we are so close to recessionary period that we could dip into it, and that's a big concern.
You're still holding to right now 2.5% next year.
2.3, that's what we had this year, and 2.5 next year.
Silver lining throughout has been inflation has been negligible, and gas prices in the last few months have been coming down steeply. Now gas prices, inflation's still fairly negligible.
Inflation is pretty good, decent, close to 2.5%, but watch out next year. Next year, I think inflation is going to be a serious problem, partly, believe it or not, is because of the food prices. We're experiencing a serious drought. Well,
rental prices aren't helping either.
That is the housing costs and energy prices, but the food prices are going to really spike up, now, and more of it next year also.
What about this recent spurt in gas prices here in Southern California? 20 cents up.
Yeah, it all goes back. Yeah, it goes back to oil prices. Oil prices dipped down close to 80, and now they're back again close to 90. And unfortunately, you know how it works. When oil prices go up, immediately gas prices follow. And when they go down, they don't go down as fast. But I think, barring any unexpected event, we should experience seeing gas prices between $3.25 to $3.75. And as we get to the end of the summer, the demand is going to subside, and that should help.
And we've come to live with that. Fiscal cliff, the sale of the register, more about these California bankruptcies, all stuff great for our next show. We'll talk about that. And two economies maybe we could learn something from, Colombia and Peru.
They're doing well.
Who knew? 5% growth, better than that, on our next Chapman Business Report. My thanks to the boss, as always, Dr. Esmael Adibi. the premier economist in the nation. I'll make that stake. Jeff Cole Productions, Chapman class of 2001. His crew puts on the Chapman Business Report. Everything you see and hear. My thanks to them as always. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week. I'm Pete Weitzner.
Funding for this program was provided by Chapman University.